Peace had ruled the galaxy for so long that most species had forgotten what war even looked like. The great civilizations talked through their problems. They negotiated. They compromised. Fighting was something primitive cultures did before they evolved past such barbaric behavior. The Galactic Concordance had perfected this art of peaceful coexistence. And for 847 cycles, not a single major conflict had disrupted their comfortable existence. Rilth sorted through dusty digital files in the historical archives, her 4 Aventi eyes struggling to stay focused. This was the most boring job in the entire Concordance, but someone had to maintain the old records. Most of the documents were about trade disputes that had been solved centuries ago, or diplomatic protocols that nobody used anymore. She yawned and reached for another file when an urgent message flashed across her screen. Unknown ships had appeared in the outer spiral. They called themselves the Talon Hegemony. They were demanding that the Concordance hand over 3 colony systems immediately. When the Concordance sent diplomats to discuss the matter, the Talon forces destroyed their ship and killed everyone aboard. Then they attacked the Braxis colonies. Rilth felt her blood run cold. This could not be happening. Nobody attacked Concordance space. Nobody killed diplomats. There had to be some misunderstanding. The emergency council session was chaos. Counselors who normally spoke in measured philosophical tones were shouting over each other. Vorin, the head counselor, tried desperately to restore order. His elderly frame shook with distress as he called for calm. The Defense Fleet commander, a stocky Lorn named Brentix, delivered her report with barely controlled anger. 63 Concordance ships had engaged the Talon forces at Braxis. The enemy had only 47 vessels, but they fought with shocking brutality. They did not care about casualties. They did not retreat when damaged. They kept attacking until the Concordance fleet reached 12% losses and withdrew according to standard protocols. 15 million. Concordance citizens were now under Talon occupation. Vorin looked like he had aged 10 cycles in a single day. He ordered another fleet to retake Braxis, but everyone in the chamber knew the truth. The Concordance did not know how to fight a real war. Their weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. Their doctrine prioritized preserving life over achieving victory. They had built a perfect system for fighting other peaceful species, but the Talon hegemony was not peaceful. 3 more colony systems fell over the next 2 weeks. Each time the pattern repeated. The Concordance fleet would engage, take casualties, reach their threshold, and retreat. The Talon forces just kept coming. Rilth could not sleep. She kept thinking about all those citizens under enemy control. The Concordance had promised to protect them, and now they were abandoned because the fleet commanders refused to accept higher casualties. There had to be something in the archives that could help, some forgotten piece of military knowledge from before the Concordance was formed. She started searching through the oldest files, from the violent era before peace became universal. What she found made her hands shake. It was a quarantine order, 900 cycles old, marked with the highest security classification. The file was about a planet called Earth. The report described Earth as a Class 12 deathworld, the most dangerous planetary environment in the known galaxy.
High gravity.
Extreme weather. Aggressive predator species. The planet itself seemed designed to kill anything living on it. But somehow a species called humans had not just survived but thrived. They had conquered their world through sheer determination and violence. The report got worse. Humans had developed space travel only 2 centuries ago, but they already had more warships than most species built in a millennium. They had nearly exterminated themselves multiple times with weapons of horrifying power. Their entire history was one endless cycle of warfare, brief peace, then more warfare. They fought over resources, ideology, religion, territory, and sometimes just because they could. The psychological profile was particularly disturbing. Humans were described as excessively aggressive, pathologically competitive, and dangerously stubborn. They did not know when to quit. When faced with impossible odds, they fought harder. When told something could not be done, they did it anyway. They were, according to the report, fundamentally incompatible with civilized galactic society. The recommendation was clear. Permanent quarantine. No contact. Let them either destroy themselves or evolve past their violent nature. Under no circumstances should they be allowed into the greater galaxy. Rilth read the file 3 times. Then she checked the current star charts. Earth was still there, still quarantined. The Concordance had maintained the blockade for 900 cycles, keeping the humans isolated from the rest of the galaxy. She made a decision that would change everything. She requested an emergency meeting with Counselor Vorin. He met her in a small office away from the main council chambers. He looked exhausted, his 4 eyes dim and unfocused. When she placed the Earth file on his desk, he stared at it like she had handed him a live explosive. Vorin read in silence. His face went through several emotions: shock, horror, disbelief, and finally something that might have been desperate hope. When he finished, he looked at Rilth with an expression she could not quite identify. "You want us to contact these humans, these violent, aggressive, dangerous humans. You want to bring them into our war." Rilth kept her voice steady. "We are losing, honored counselor. The Talon hegemony does not follow our rules. They do not care about our protocols. Every day we delay, more citizens die. We need someone who knows how to fight. Really fight. We need someone who does not give up when the casualties get high." Vorin stood and walked to the window overlooking Concordance Prime. The beautiful city stretched below them, peaceful and prosperous. "Do you know what you are asking? We quarantined Earth because we were afraid of what humans might do to the galaxy. Now you want to unleash them? What if they are worse than the Talon hegemony? Then we will have traded one enemy for another. But at least we will survive long enough to face that problem. Right now, we are losing everything." The vote took place 3 days later. The debate was fierce. Many counselors argued that contacting Earth violated every principle the Concordance stood for. Others pointed out that principles meant nothing if there was no concordance left to uphold them. In the end, survival won over ideology. 847 votes in favor. 12 against. The order was given. Contact Earth. Ask for military assistance. Pray that the cure was not worse than the disease. Nobody in that chamber understood what they had just done. They thought they were hiring mercenaries. They thought they were bringing in specialists to solve a temporary problem. They did not understand that they were about to wake up a sleeping predator that had been pacing in its cage for 900 cycles, waiting for someone to finally open the door. The Concordance had forgotten fear. They had forgotten that peace was not the natural state of the universe. They had forgotten that sometimes, to preserve civilization, you had to deal with those who remembered how to be uncivilized. They were about to get a very thorough reminder. The message was sent to the Sol system. It would take weeks to reach Earth and weeks more to get a response. Rilth returned to her archives and waited. Somewhere out there, beyond the quarantine zone, humans would receive the Concordance's plea for help. She wondered what they would say. She wondered what they would do. Most of all, she wondered if she had just saved the Concordance or doomed it to something far worse than conquest. The galaxy was about to change. The comfortable era was ending, and nobody was ready for what came next. The diplomatic vessel Harmonious Dawn trembled as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Vorin gripped his seat, his 4 eyes widening at what the sensors were showing. Space around Earth was not empty. It was crowded with military installations. Massive orbital fortresses bristled with weapon systems. Hundreds of warships moved in coordinated patrols. Defense satellites formed geometric patterns around every planet in the system. This was not what a peaceful civilization looked like. Rilth stood beside him, her fingers nervously adjusting her translator device. They had come to ask for help from a species that had been isolated for 9 centuries, a species that the Concordance had deemed too dangerous for contact. Now they needed those dangerous qualities to survive. A voice crackled through the communications system, speaking perfect Concordance common despite Earth having no previous contact with their language. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Terran Defense Initiative space. Identify yourself and state your purpose. You have 30 seconds, 30 seconds. Not even time for a proper diplomatic greeting. Vorin quickly activated his microphone. "This is Counselor Vorin of the Galactic Concordance. We come seeking an audience with your leadership regarding a matter of urgent importance." The response came after a brief pause. "Maintain current position. Any deviation will be considered hostile. Prepare for boarding inspection." 2 sleek warships materialized beside them, appearing so suddenly that Rilth gasped. They were smaller than the Harmonious Dawn but radiated lethal efficiency. Every surface seemed designed for combat. These were not exploration vessels with defensive weapons added as an afterthought. These were pure instruments of war. The boarding party arrived in a compact assault shuttle that locked onto their airlock with mechanical precision. When the hatch opened, Voren got his first look at humans in person. They wore full combat armor, visors down, weapons held ready. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking every corner of the airlock before their leader stepped forward and removed her helmet. Rachel Kim had dark eyes that seemed to analyze everything in an instant. Her expression was neutral, but her posture suggested she could react to any threat in milliseconds. "I am Commander Kim, Terran Defense Initiative. You claim to represent a galactic government that we have never heard of. Explain why you bypassed our border protocols and entered our space without authorization." Voren tried to maintain his diplomatic composure. "Commander, I apologize for the irregular approach. We face an existential crisis. Your world was placed under quarantine 900 cycles ago by our predecessors. We would not have violated that quarantine except that we desperately need military assistance." Something flickered in Kim's eyes. Not quite amusement, but something close. "You need military assistance? From the species you isolated because you thought we were too violent?" She looked at Rilth. "Someone finally picked a fight with you, and you do not know how to fight back," Rilth answered before Voren could stop her. "Yes, the Talon hegemony is conquering our colonies. We cannot stop them. Our military doctrine is designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. We need help from people who understand real combat." Kim studied them for a long moment. Then she gestured toward the corridor. "Come with me. Director Torres will want to hear this directly." They were escorted to Orbital Station Olympus, and the scale of it took Voren's breath away. It was not just a space station. It was a military fortress the size of a small moon. Weapon emplacements covered every surface. Docking bays held hundreds of warships in various states of readiness. Thousands of personnel moved through the corridors with obvious purpose and discipline. This was a civilization permanently ready for war. Director David Torres met them in a conference room, overlooking Earth. The planet turned slowly below, blue and green and deceptively beautiful. Torres himself was an older human with gray hair and the weathered look of someone who had seen combat. He listened to Voren's explanation without interrupting, his face impassive. When Voren finished, Torres leaned back and steepled his fingers. "Let me understand this. Your government maintained peace for 8 centuries. You have minimal military capacity, no experience with actual warfare. Now someone is taking your territory, killing your citizens, and you want us to fight your war." Voren felt heat rise to his face. Put that way, it sounded shameful. "We are prepared to offer generous terms. Trade agreements, technology exchange, anything within reason." Torres glanced at Kim, and they seemed to communicate without words. Then he stood and walked to the window. "Before we discuss terms, you need to understand what you are really asking for. You are not hiring soldiers. You are unleashing predators. Humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We survived by being tougher, meaner, and more stubborn than anything else. Then we spent 10,000 years fighting each other, perfecting the art of warfare." He turned to face them. "We do not retreat at 12% casualties, Counselor. We do not have thresholds where battles become too expensive to continue. When we commit to something, we finish it. We win or we die trying. Can you live with what that means?" Rilth spoke up. "That is exactly why we came to you." Torres studied her carefully. "We will help. But you need to accept that our methods will horrify you. War is not clean. It is not fair. It is brutal and ugly, and people die. Innocent people sometimes. We will do everything possible to minimize civilian casualties. But we will not let the enemy use your moral standards as a shield. We fight to win." The negotiations took 2 days. Humanity would provide a military task force to assess the Talon threat and provide tactical assistance. In return, they wanted full intelligence sharing, operational freedom, a permanent seat on the Concordance Council after the conflict, and an end to the quarantine. The Concordance agreed to everything. They had no leverage and no alternatives. General Patricia Wong was assigned as military liaison. She was a compact woman with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. When she briefed Voren and Rilth on the deployment plan, her confidence was almost disturbing. "We are sending 3 carriers, 12 destroyers, and the dreadnought Indomitable. Approximately 15,000 personnel. This is a reconnaissance force to evaluate Talon capabilities." Rilth could not help herself. "General, the Talon forces at the front number over 50,000. "Is 15,000 enough?" Wong smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Counselor, you are thinking in terms of numbers. That is your first mistake. Wars are not won by who has more ships. They are won by who has more will, who is better trained, who is willing to sacrifice. Your people run when losses become uncomfortable. We fight until the job is done. You will see the difference. Over the next week, Rilth observed human military preparations. She watched soldiers train in zero-gravity combat, moving through scenarios that would give any concordance officer nightmares. She watched them practice boarding actions, learning to fight through corridors in vacuum conditions. She watched them prepare for war with an intensity that seemed almost religious. One evening, she found herself in an observation lounge with a young private named Lucas White. He was methodically cleaning his rifle, a ritual he performed every day. She asked why humans still trained for ground combat when wars were fought in space. Lucas looked up, his young face serious. Because sometimes the only way to really win is to stand on the ground and look your enemy in the eye. Space battles are abstract. You die clean from far away. Ground combat is personal. It is where you prove what you are really made of. It is where wars actually end. The task force assembled over Earth during the following days. Rilth watched the massive ships gather, their hulls painted in aggressive gray and black patterns. These were not the elegant white vessels of the Concordance fleet. These were weapons, pure and simple. During the 2-week journey to Concordance space, Rilth tried to understand human culture. She listened to their jokes about death and danger. She watched them bond through shared hardship. She noticed how they prepared for every possible scenario, never assuming victory was assured. She asked Commander Kim why humans seem so comfortable discussing their own mortality. Kim thought carefully before answering. Because we accept it. Death is part of life. In war, it is part of duty. We honor those who fall, but we do not let fear of death paralyze us. If you hesitate in combat, you die anyway. At least this way we control when and how we risk our lives. They arrived at Sanctum 7, a colony world besieged by 47 Talon warships. The Concordance defense fleet had withdrawn to high orbit, unwilling to accept further casualties. On the planet below, millions waited for a rescue that might never come. Admiral Henry Cross commanded the human task force from the carrier Indomitable. He studied the Talon formation with the intensity of a predator analyzing prey. The enemy ships were arranged in overlapping defensive positions, relying on superior numbers and shield technology. Cross allowed himself a thin smile. They fight like they expect opponents to quit when things get rough. They have never faced anyone who hits back harder when hurt. He turned to his tactical officer. All ships combat formation. Maximum acceleration. We are going straight through their formation. Rilth felt her stomach drop. This was insanity. This was suicide. The Concordance would never approve such aggressive tactics. But as she watched the human fleet accelerate toward overwhelming odds without hesitation or fear, she began to understand. The Concordance had not hired soldiers. They had unleashed something far more dangerous. They had unleashed humans who believed that winning was worth any price, who saw death as acceptable if it served a purpose, who would rather die fighting than live in defeat. The Talon hegemony was about to learn what happened when a peaceful galaxy finally called in the predators. Acceleration pressed Rilth back into her seat as the carrier Indomitable surged toward the Talon blockade at combat speed. Through the observation windows, she could see the enemy formation growing larger. 47 capital ships against 15. By every tactical calculation the Concordance had ever developed, this was certain death. Yet the humans showed no fear. They worked at their stations with calm efficiency, as if charging into overwhelming odds was just another day's work. Admiral Cross sat in the command center, perfectly still except for his eyes tracking data across multiple displays. His officers moved around him in practiced coordination. There was no panic, no desperate last-minute planning. They had prepared for this, trained for this, and now they were simply executing. Talon fleet is hailing us, the communications officer reported. They are demanding our surrender. Cross did not even glance up. Ignore it. Weapons status report. All railguns charged and locked on primary targets. Missile batteries loaded with nuclear warheads. Point defense systems active. We are ready, sir. All ships attack formation Delta 7. Full military thrust. We go right through them. The fleet accelerated even harder. Rilth felt the compensators strain as massive engines pushed the ships toward impossible speeds. The Talon formation began repositioning, their shields brightening as they prepared to repel the attack. They seemed confident. Why would they not be? They had superior numbers and defensive positions. Talon energy weapons fired first. Brilliant beams of destructive force lanced across the void, converging on the lead human destroyers. Shields flared. Armor blackened and melted. The destroyer Relentless took a direct hit to its port side. Atmosphere vented in a crystalline cloud. The ship lurched but maintained course and speed. Relentless reports heavy damage to engineering spaces. Multiple hull breaches. They are requesting permission to fall back for repairs. Cross-check the damage assessment on his screen. Request denied. Relentless, continue attack run. Reroute all available power to weapon systems. Rilth felt sick. That ship was dying. Its crew was dying. And the humans were ordering them to keep attacking instead of saving themselves. This was madness. The human fleet returned fire. The railguns made a sound like thunder even through the vacuum of space, transmitted through the ship's hull. Solid metal projectiles, each weighing several tons and moving at a fraction of light speed, hammered into Talon shields. The first impacts were absorbed. Then the shields began to flicker. Then they failed entirely. 3 Talon ships simply came apart as kinetic rounds punched through them like paper. Missiles away, weapons control announced. Thousands of missiles streaked toward the Talon fleet in waves. These were not the precision munitions the Concordance used, designed to disable without destroying. These were nuclear-tipped warheads meant to overwhelm defenses and annihilate targets. They detonated in brilliant cascades of light and radiation. 4 more Talon capital ships vanished in the firestorm. The Talon fleet poured fire into the human formation. The Relentless took another hit. Then another. Its reactor containment failed. Rilth watched in horror as the destroyer broke apart, spilling wreckage and bodies into space. Over 1,000 humans died in seconds. But the crew of the Relentless had one final action planned. The dying ship used its remaining thrusters to drift toward a nearby Talon cruiser. Escape pods launched, but they were not fleeing. They were attacking. The pods slammed into the enemy hull and cutting charges blew holes through the armor. "What are they doing?" Rilth whispered. Commander Kim stood nearby, watching with professional detachment. "Boarding action. Relentless is lost, so her Marines are taking an enemy ship as compensation." "That is insane. The Talon crew will kill them." Kim shook her head slightly. "The Talon crew has never fought inside their own ship. They have weapons, but no training. Our Marines train for this. Watch." Human soldiers in powered armor poured through the breaches, fighting through corridors in zero gravity with practiced efficiency. The Talon defenders had numerical superiority, but no experience with close-quarters combat. They scattered in panic as humans advanced through their ship like a force of nature. Within 10 minutes, the Talon cruiser went dark. Then its weapons came online and began firing on other Talon ships. The humans had captured it. The battle continued with brutal intensity. The human fleet drove deeper into the Talon formation, accepting damage that would force any Concordance fleet to retreat. The destroyer Defiant lost its main engines. The cruiser Stalwart suffered a hull breach that killed 300 crew members in seconds. But they did not break formation. They did not retreat. They just kept fighting. Admiral Cross watched his tactical display with cold calculation. They are starting to lose cohesion. Focus all fire on their command ship. I want their admiral to feel this personally. Every human weapon concentrated on the Talon flagship. Railgun rounds punched through layers of shielding. Missiles overwhelmed point defenses. The massive enemy vessel shuddered under sustained assault. Its armor held against the first barrage. Then a railgun round penetrated the bridge section. The flagship's lights went dark. The Talon fleet broke. Ships began retreating individually, abandoning their formation and their mission. Some tried to run. Others attempted to surrender. The humans methodically destroyed the ones that fled and accepted surrender from those that stopped fighting. When the guns finally fell silent, 14 Talon ships were destroyed. 8 had surrendered. The rest had scattered across the system. The human task force had lost 1 destroyer and suffered severe damage to 2 other vessels. Over 1,200 humans were dead. Rilth found Admiral Cross in the command center, reviewing casualty reports. His face was grim as he read through name after name. 1,200 personnel, most from Relentless. I need to write to their families. Admiral, you won. You saved Sanctum 7, the blockade is broken. Cross looked at her with exhausted eyes. Winning does not erase the cost, Counselor. Every person on this fleet is someone's child, someone's friend, someone's loved one. I sent them into battle knowing some would not return. That is the burden of command. That is what victory costs. He turned back to his reports and Rilth quietly left him alone. She was beginning to understand something fundamental about humans. The concordance calculated losses as percentages and statistics. Humans knew each loss by name and carried the weight personally. News of the battle spread across the galaxy with impossible speed. The humans had arrived. The humans had won. The humans fought with a ferocity that made the Talon hegemony look restrained by comparison. Some species celebrated, others were terrified. What had the Concordance unleashed? The Concordance Council convened an emergency session. Arguments erupted immediately. Some counselors were grateful the humans had proven effective. Others were horrified by the methods used. Nuclear weapons, boarding actions, fighting to the death instead of retreating at acceptable loss thresholds. Counselor Vorin finally stood and demanded silence. We asked for help from a species we deemed too dangerous for civilized contact. We knew what they were. We knew what they were capable of. We cannot now act shocked that they are exactly what we needed them to be. A lorn counselor rose in protest. But the brutality, the casualties, they turned a rescue mission into a slaughter. Vorin's 4 eyes fixed on him with unusual intensity. They saved 15 million concordant citizens on Sanctum 7. How many more lives are you willing to sacrifice to maintain your moral comfort? How many colonies will you abandon because you are afraid of what victory requires? The Council had no answer to that. Down on Sanctum 7, human marines secured the planet. Talon ground forces surrendered without resistance after hearing what happened to their fleet. The concordant citizens emerged from shelters expecting to greet heroes. Instead, they saw exhausted soldiers who looked like they had fought through hell itself. A young Aventi girl approached a marine whose armor was scorched black. She held out a flower. Thank you for saving us. The marine knelt down carefully, his movements gentle despite the powered armor. He accepted the flower like it was something precious. You are welcome, little one. Stay safe now. He stood and returned to his duties. The girl watched him go, not understanding that this soldier had watched 1,200 of his comrades die that day, not understanding the weight he carried. Rilth recorded everything in detailed reports for the archives. Future generations needed to understand this moment, the moment when the galaxy learned that peace without strength was not really peace at all. It was just a temporary pause before extinction. The Talon hegemony received news of their defeat with rage and disbelief. They had lost ships. They had lost face. They had been humiliated by an unknown species appearing from nowhere. Supreme Commander Thex called his war council and gave a simple order: mobilize everything. Every ship, every soldier, every resource. They would assemble the largest fleet in Talon history. Over 300 capital ships. They would crush these humans. They would prove that numbers and determination could overcome anything. They did not understand that humans had invented the concept of total war. They did not understand that when humans committed to something, they did not stop until it was finished. They did not know that they had awakened something the galaxy had tried to keep asleep for 9 centuries. The Deathworlders were free now, and the real war was about to begin. Supreme Commander Thex slammed his clawed fist into the command console, cracking the display screen. Around him, his war council stood in rigid silence. They had learned not to speak when their leader was in a rage. The holographic replay of the Battle of Sanctum 7 showed their forces scattering in defeat, fleeing from an enemy that should have been overwhelmed by superior numbers. An old advisor named Grax finally dared to speak. Supreme Commander, these humans are unlike any enemy we have faced. They accept casualties that would break our forces. They use weapons we consider excessive. Perhaps we should open negotiations. Thex moved with frightening speed. His backhand strike sent Grax sprawling to the floor, bleeding from a gash across his face. Negotiate? We are the Talon hegemony. We do not negotiate with inferior species. We will mobilize the entire fleet. 300 ships. We will erase these humans and teach the galaxy what happens when you challenge us. The mobilization order went out across Talon space within hours. Every warship was recalled from patrol. Every reserve unit was activated. Supply depots worked around the clock. The largest military force the Talon hegemony had ever assembled began gathering at their forward staging bases. It would take weeks to coordinate such a massive force, but when they moved, they believed they would be unstoppable. Rilth barely slept anymore. Since the battle at Sanctum 7, she had been diving deeper into the historical archives about Earth. What she discovered kept her awake, with a mixture of fascination and horror. The humans had not just fought occasional wars. Their entire history was warfare interrupted by brief periods of peace. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. Multiple times they had come within moments of using them. She found records of something called the Second World War. Over 70 million humans had died. The entire planet had been engulfed in conflict. Cities were bombed into rubble. Entire populations were systematically exterminated. And when it finally ended, the humans had not given up violence. They had simply learned to be more efficient at it. There were files on other conflicts: Korea, Vietnam, the resource wars, the corporate belt conflicts. Each war taught humans new lessons about combat. Each conflict refined their ability to inflict and endure suffering. They had never stopped preparing for war. Even during peacetime, Rilth compiled everything into a comprehensive report titled Understanding the Deathworlders, a historical analysis of human warfare. She distributed it to every Concordance Council member. Most would not read it. They did not want to know. But some would, and those who did would understand what they had brought into the galaxy. Earth's response to the Talon mobilization was swift and overwhelming. If the enemy was committing everything, humanity would match them. 17 carrier battle groups departed from Sol system over the course of 3 days. Over 200 capital ships. Thousands of support vessels, fighter wings that numbered in the tens of thousands. The entire Terran Defense Initiative was going to war. Admiral Sarah Mitchell commanded the deployment from the supercarrier Righteous Fury, the largest warship humanity had ever constructed. She convened a strategy session with General Wong and Admiral Cross in a secure conference room. Holographic displays showed the Talon force disposition and supply routes. The Talon hegemony is gathering everything they have, Mitchell said, studying the data. 300 capital ships in one massive fleet. They think overwhelming force will win. Wong leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the intelligence reports. Numbers win battles. Logistics wins wars. What do their supply lines look like? Cross manipulated the hologram to highlight key installations. Poorly designed. They are pulling ships from across their territory without proper coordination. They have 4 major supply depots providing fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. If we eliminate those depots, their fleet becomes stranded. Mitchell nodded slowly. Then we avoid their main fleet and strike their logistics. We make them chase us while we destroy their ability to sustain operations. Wong's expression turned serious. There is a problem. The supply depots are located in civilian sectors. There will be non-combatants, possibly millions. The Concordance will not approve civilian casualties. The 3 senior officers looked at each other. This was the critical decision point. This was where human warfare diverged from Concordance ideals of civilized conflict. Mitchell spoke carefully. The Talon hegemony targeted Concordance civilians first. They started this war by attacking colonies. We will target military infrastructure exclusively. If civilians are present, that is the Talon leadership's failure for placing military assets in population centers. We will provide advance warnings. We will allow evacuations. But we will not let the enemy hide behind innocents to protect their war machine. Cross and Wong both nodded agreement. They knew this would horrify the Concordance. But they also knew it was militarily necessary. War was not clean. War was not fair. War was about systematically destroying the enemy's ability and will to fight. The operation plan went to the Concordance Council for approval. The reaction was exactly as expected. Councilors shouted in outrage. How could humans even consider striking near civilian populations? This was barbarism. This was exactly why Earth had been quarantined in the first place. Vorin listened to the protests with growing frustration. Finally, he stood and demanded silence. We are not debating an ideal war fought under perfect conditions. We are discussing survival. The Talon hegemony has killed millions of our citizens without mercy. Now we have allies capable of defeating them, and we want to dictate exactly how they fight? We asked humans to save us. We need to let them do it their way. The vote was close. 412 in favor, 435 against. The operation targeting supply depots was denied. The Concordance insisted humans could only engage military targets in deep space, away from any civilian presence. Mitchell received the decision aboard the Righteous Fury. She read it twice, then looked at Wong with a wry smile. They want us to win, but only if we do it nicely. Wong shook her head. We signed agreements. We gave our word. We cannot violate Concordance oversight. Mitchell thought for a long moment. We cannot strike the depots themselves. But nothing prevents us from intercepting every supply convoy leaving those depots. We can destroy their logistics chain without ever firing near civilians. It takes longer but achieves the same strategic goal. The human fleet dispersed into small hunter groups. They began intercepting Talon supply convoys across a dozen systems. Fuel tankers, ammunition transports, spare parts haulers. Every convoy was destroyed before reaching the main fleet. The humans would appear from nowhere, eliminate their targets with brutal efficiency, and disappear before Talon reinforcements could respond. Supreme Commander Thex watched his supply situation deteriorate with growing rage. His massive fleet was assembled and ready, but it was burning through fuel-hunting ghosts. His ammunition reserves were dwindling. His ships needed maintenance they could not get. The humans were bleeding him dry without ever facing his main force. He called another war council. Grax stood in the back, his face still bruised. Thex paced like a caged predator. We will force them to fight. We will attack a Concordance core world, something they cannot ignore. They will have to defend it, and when they commit their forces, we will destroy them completely. Grax spoke quietly. Supreme Commander, our supply situation is critical. We should consolidate our forces and secure our logistics before launching a major offensive. Thex struck him again. The old advisor collapsed, blood streaming from his nose. I did not ask your opinion. I gave an order. Find me a target the humans cannot ignore. The target selected was Harmony Station, the political center of the Concordance, a massive orbital complex housing 20 million civilians and the central government. If the Talon hegemony could capture or destroy it, the entire Concordance would collapse. The Talon fleet altered course toward Harmony Station. Thex was confident the humans would have to defend such an important target, and when they did, his 300 ships would crush their smaller force through sheer overwhelming numbers. He did not realize that Admiral Mitchell had predicted exactly this move. She had studied Thex's psychological profile carefully. He was proud, aggressive, and predictable. When frustrated, he would do something dramatic to force a decisive confrontation. Mitchell had prepared a trap. The garrison system was an unremarkable collection of asteroids and debris orbiting a dim star. Mitchell had spent 2 weeks preparing it as a battlefield, mining asteroids with explosives, positioning hidden weapons platforms, creating fields of fire and kill zones, turning an entire star system into one massive ambush. She broadcast a message on all frequencies, knowing Thex would receive it. Supreme Commander Thex of the Talon hegemony, you claim to be a great warrior, but you fight like a scavenger attacking the weak. I am Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Initiative. If you want to face humans in real combat, come to the garrison system. We will be waiting. Bring your entire fleet. Let us see if your courage matches your threats. It was an insult calculated to enrage a proud leader. Thex took the bait immediately. He diverted his entire fleet from Harmony Station and set course for garrison system at maximum speed. 300 capital ships, thousands of fighters, the largest military force in Talon history, heading directly into a carefully prepared killing ground. Rilth watched these developments from Concordance Prime. She had been studying human military psychology and strategy. She realized that humans did not just fight to win battles. They fought to break their enemy's will to resist. They used psychological warfare as effectively as physical weapons. Mitchell was not just trying to destroy the Talon fleet. She was trying to destroy Thex's confidence, his reputation, his ability to command. She was fighting on multiple levels simultaneously, attacking both military capability and morale. Rilth sent a message to Vorin. The humans are about to engage the entire Talon fleet in a decisive battle. We should witness this. Whatever happens will define the galaxy's future. Vorin agreed. They boarded a fast courier ship and traveled to the garrison system, arriving 2 days before the Talon fleet was expected. Mitchell welcomed them aboard the Righteous Fury personally. Counselors, you are about to see how humans wage total war. I warn you now, it will not be pleasant. We do not fight for glory or honor. We fight to win completely, And complete victory means destroying the enemy so thoroughly they never threaten anyone again. Rilth looked at the tactical displays showing the prepared battlefield. Every asteroid was marked with hidden weapons. The human fleet was dispersed and concealed. It was perfect. Admiral, the Talon fleet outnumbers you 3-1. Are you certain this plan will work? Mitchell looked at her with eyes that had seen too many battles. Numbers matter less than people think, Counselor. Will matters. Strategy matters. Preparation matters. The Talon hegemony has more ships, but humans have something they will never understand. We know how to lose people we love and keep fighting anyway. Tomorrow they will learn what happens when you face an enemy that refuses to quit. 307 Talon warships dropped into the garrison system in perfect formation, their arrival creating ripples in spacetime that registered on sensors across multiple star systems. Supreme Commander Thex stood on the bridge of his flagship Dominant Fang, surveying the asteroid field ahead with satisfaction. His fleet stretched across the void like an iron curtain. No force in the galaxy could stand against such overwhelming power. His sensor officer studied the displays with confusion. Supreme Commander, we are only detecting 12 to 15 human capital ships scattered throughout the asteroid field. This seems insufficient. Thex laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. They realized their mistake. They challenged us with insults, but now they see our true strength and hide like prey animals. All ships advance into the field. Find them, destroy them. Show the galaxy what happens to those who dare mock the Talon hegemony. Old Grax stood quietly in the shadows, his face still bruised from multiple beatings. He watched the tactical display with growing unease. The humans were not fools. They would not challenge the entire Talon fleet without a plan. This felt wrong. This felt like a trap. The Talon fleet entered the asteroid field in parade formation, moving with confidence through the maze of rocks and debris. Human ships appeared on sensors briefly, then vanished behind asteroids. They were running, hiding, playing a game of cat and mouse. Thex ordered his fleet to spread out and corner them. Ships lost visual contact with each other as they pushed deeper into the field. Communications became difficult due to electromagnetic interference from the asteroids. Aboard the Righteous Fury, Admiral Mitchell watched the Talon fleet spread exactly as her tactical models had predicted. They were breaking formation to pursue individual targets, abandoning their numerical advantage to hunt scattered prey. Perfect. All units. Status check, she ordered with perfect calm. Reports came in from 4 carrier groups hiding in the debris field's electromagnetic shadows. 3 more groups waited in the outer system to cut off any retreat. Thousands of mines were attached to asteroids throughout the field, their detonation codes loaded and ready. Railgun platforms disguised as space debris were powered up and targeting. The garrison system was not a battlefield. It was a weapon system, and the Talon fleet had just walked into the firing chamber. Wait for full penetration, Mitchell said softly. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they are winning. Varin and Rilth observed from the command deck, watching the Talon ships spreading through the asteroids like hunters pursuing wounded prey. They could see the human positions marked on tactical displays and the weapon systems hidden throughout the field. This is an ambush, Varin whispered, his 4 eyes wide. Mitchell stood beside them, her gaze never leaving the displays. This is war, Counselor. The enemy has superior numbers. We have superior planning. Now watch what happens when predators walk into a trap designed by smarter predators. A Talon heavy cruiser reached the trigger point, pushing deep into the asteroid field. It passed within 50 meters of a rock that human engineers had hollowed out and packed with explosives 3 weeks ago. Mitchell gave a slight nod. The detonation was catastrophic. The asteroid fragmented into thousands of high-velocity projectiles. The Talon cruiser's shields held for perhaps 3 seconds. Then rocks moving at several kilometers per second punched through the energy barriers and tore the hull to shreds. The ship came apart in silence, but that was just the signal. Across the entire asteroid field, hundreds of prepared charges detonated simultaneously. The Talon fleet, spread out and unable to maneuver in the dense debris, took the full force of the barrage. Ships died by the dozens, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of destruction. Chaos erupted through their ranks. All units, spring the trap! Mitchell's order was calm despite the violence erupting on the displays. Human carrier groups emerged from concealment. Thousands of fighters launched in coordinated waves. Hidden railgun platforms opened fire, their solid projectiles punching through Talon shields with brutal efficiency. The enemy fleet, designed for open space warfare, found itself fighting in conditions that negated every tactical advantage. Thex screamed orders on his bridge. "Defensive formation! Return fire! Get us out of this field immediately!" But his orders were impossible to execute. His ships were scattered, separated by asteroids and explosions. Individual vessels tried to fight back, but were being systematically destroyed by coordinated human attacks. For every human ship they targeted, 3 more appeared from different angles. Human fighter pilots flew through the asteroid field like demons, pulling maneuvers that should have killed them from G-forces alone. They accepted horrific casualty rates but never stopped attacking. For every human fighter destroyed, 2 more Talon ships burned. The carriers maintained distance, using asteroids for cover while launching endless waves of fighters and missiles. Their strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Use the environment. Maintain mobility. Strike hard and fade away. Never give the enemy a concentrated target. A Talon battleship broke free from the main engagement area and accelerated toward open space. For a moment it looked like it might escape the killing ground. Then 3 human destroyers emerged from behind a massive asteroid, where they had been waiting specifically for this scenario. They fired everything simultaneously. The battleship's shields collapsed. Its hull ruptured. It tumbled lifeless through space. Grax watched the slaughter from the dominant Fang with mounting horror. "Supreme Commander, we must retreat.
We are losing ships too quickly.
We need to regroup in open space where we can properly use our numbers." Thex backhanded him viciously. The old advisor fell and did not rise this time. "We do not retreat. We are the Talon hegemony. All ships locate the human flagship and destroy it. Kill their leader and they will break." But his orders were fragmenting into chaos. Individual ship captains were making their own decisions now, ignoring central command. Some tried to fight. Some tried to flee. Some tried to surrender. The Talon fleet was no longer a unified force. It was 300 individual ships fighting desperately for survival. Mitchell observed the enemy formation collapse on her tactical displays. She allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "They are broken. All units, concentrate fire on the dominant Fang. I want Supreme Commander Thex to understand exactly what he walked into." 4 entire carrier groups focused every weapon on Thex's flagship. Railgun rounds hammered shields until they failed. Missiles overwhelmed point defenses in coordinated salvos. Nuclear warheads detonated against armor plating. The dominant Fang was the most powerful ship in the Talon arsenal, but it could not withstand the focused fury of hundreds of human weapons firing in perfect coordination. The bridge shook violently. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Officers died at their stations. Thex stood in the center of chaos, refusing to accept what was happening. His fleet was superior. His numbers were overwhelming. How could they possibly lose? A railgun round penetrated the bridge armor. The hypersonic projectile punched through bulkheads like tissue paper. It missed Thex by centimeters, the shockwave alone killing a dozen officers around him. The Supreme Commander finally understood. He had already lost. "All ships, retreat," he said weakly. "Retreat to—" The communications array exploded. The engines failed. The ship was dying around him piece by piece. Thex realized he would not escape. None of them would escape. He opened an emergency channel to the human fleet. "I surrender. The Talon hegemony surrenders unconditionally. Please, cease fire." Mitchell received the transmission. She looked at Vorin and Rilth. "Your decision, counselors."
"Do we accept their surrender?"
Vorin felt conflicting emotions war inside him. Part of him wanted to reject the surrender, to make the Talon hegemony pay for every concordant citizen they had killed. But that was the old way. That was how cycles of revenge began. "Accept their surrender," Vorin said quietly. "But with strict conditions. Complete disarmament. War crimes tribunals for their leadership. Reparations to every world they attacked, and Thex must stand trial personally for his crimes." Mitchell nodded once. She opened a fleet-wide channel.
All Talon forces, this is Admiral Mitchell.
"Your Supreme Commander has surrendered unconditionally. Power down all weapon systems and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that continues fighting will be destroyed without further warning. You have 60 seconds to comply." Most Talon ships immediately went dark. A handful tried to run. Human forces destroyed them with clinical efficiency. Within 10 minutes, the battle was over. The final casualty count was staggering. The Talon hegemony lost 219 capital ships, thousands of fighters, Over 100,000 personnel killed or captured. The humans lost 23 ships and 37,000 personnel. By any objective measure, it was a complete and decisive victory. But the human fleet did not celebrate. They began immediate search and rescue operations, recovering survivors from destroyed ships, stabilizing damaged vessels, treating wounded without regard to which side they had fought for. Rilth walked through the medical bay of the Righteous Fury hours later. Human doctors worked alongside Concordance medical teams, trying to save anyone they could. A young human medic was carefully treating a Talon soldier, who had probably been trying to kill him hours before. "Why help him?" Rilth asked. "He was your enemy." The medic looked up briefly. "The war is over. When we fight without mercy. But when it ends completely. He is not my enemy anymore. He is just another person who got hurt in a war neither of us started." She found Admiral Mitchell in her private office. The Admiral looked exhausted beyond words. She was writing personal messages on a data pad. Rilth realized they were letters to the families of fallen personnel. "Admiral, you achieved a historic victory. Why do you look so defeated?" Mitchell did not look up from her writing. "Because 37,000 humans died to achieve it. Each one had a name, a family, people who loved them. Victory does not erase that cost. It only makes the cost meaningful instead of meaningless." She finished one letter and started another. "The Talon hegemony is broken. They will never threaten the Concordance again. But my people paid the price for that security in blood. That is the burden of being from a Deathworld counselor. We can do things others cannot. But we pay for that ability with the lives of those we love." News of the Battle of Garrison Field spread across the galaxy within hours. The largest space engagement in recorded history. The unstoppable Talon hegemony crushed in a single day. Humanity had won not through superior technology or numbers, but through superior strategy, superior will, and superior willingness to sacrifice. Species across the galaxy reacted with awe and terror. The humans were everything the old warnings had said. Aggressive, clever, and ruthless in pursuit of victory, but also honorable in their own way. They treated prisoners well. They accepted surrender. They followed rules of war even when winning. The galaxy was changing. The comfortable era of peace without cost was ending. A new age was beginning, where peace would be maintained not by everyone agreeing to be civilized, but by some being willing to be uncivilized on behalf of those who could not. The Deathworlders had proven themselves, and nothing would ever be the same. Sunlight streamed through the crystal dome of the treaty chamber on Concordance Prime, illuminating representatives from 47 different civilizations gathered for the most important negotiation in galactic history. Vorin looked across the massive assembly hall, noting the tension in every delegation. At the center table sat 3 distinct groups. The Concordance Council on one side, the defeated Talon hegemony representatives on another, and the human delegation, led by Admiral Mitchell and Director Torres, sitting calmly between them. Thex was absent, already in detention awaiting trial. His replacement, a moderate reformer named Pellin, sat with visible shame, his body language conveying the weight of his people's defeat and crimes. Director Torres stood to address the assembly. His voice carried across the chamber without need for amplification. "We gather here to establish a new framework for galactic security. One where aggression faces consequences. One where peace is maintained not through hope, but through strength and deterrence." A Meridian counselor rose, her voice sharp with concern. "Ambassador Torres, your people have demonstrated remarkable military capabilities, but many of us question the wisdom of giving such power a permanent role in galactic affairs. How do we know humans will not eventually use that power for conquest rather than protection?" Torres met her gaze steadily. "Because we have already conquered ourselves, counselor. Humanity spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We know intimately what tyranny looks like, what oppression feels like. We unified specifically to ensure we would never inflict those experiences on each other again. We fight to protect freedom, not to destroy it." Admiral Mitchell added. "The Concordance requested our intervention. We provided it at great cost to our own people. Now we simply ask for partnership, trade relations, cultural exchange, and representation on the Concordance Council. In return, we will guarantee the security of Concordance space against external aggression." The debates continued for 3 intense days. Some species trusted humanity based on their conduct during the war. Others feared them for the same reason. But pragmatism eventually won. The galaxy needed protectors who could actually protect. The humans had proven they could serve that function. The Treaty of Terran Concordance Alliance was signed by all attending parties. Humanity gained full trade rights, embassy access throughout Concordance space, and a permanent seat on the Council. They would establish military training academies to improve Concordance defensive capabilities. They would share non-classified defensive technology. In exchange, they formally committed to defending Concordance territory from external threats. The Talon hegemony faced systematic justice. Their territory was redistributed to species they had victimized. Reparations were established on a schedule that would take generations to complete. War crimes tribunals were convened, introducing a concept that shocked many galactic civilizations. The idea that military and political leaders could be held personally accountable for their actions during wartime was revolutionary. Thex and 14 other senior Talon commanders were tried and convicted of crimes against sapient life. 5 received execution sentences. The others were imprisoned for life. The trials were broadcast across every inhabited system, sending a clear message. Starting wars of aggression now carried personal consequences for those who ordered them. Pellin worked closely with Concordance advisors to transform what remained of the Talon hegemony. The authoritarian military state was reformed into the Talon Republic, with democratic institutions and strict civilian oversight of military forces. The transformation would take generations, but the foundation was laid. Human culture began flowing into Concordance space like water finding new channels. The first official human embassy opened on Concordance Prime, a modest building by human standards but imposing to species used to more delicate architecture. Human merchants brought goods from Earth. Human entertainment found eager audiences among species fascinated by humanity's violent history and complex culture. The Aventi developed a particular fascination with human philosophy. They studied Earth's great thinkers, trying to reconcile how a species could be simultaneously so violent and so thoughtful. They discovered concepts like just war theory, the social contract, and the paradox of tolerance, ideas that humans had developed through painful experience. Young Aventi began enrolling in human martial arts academies, not to become warriors, but to understand the discipline and mental focus that came from controlled combat. At first, watching peaceful Aventi learning to fight seemed contradictory, but they found unexpected value in understanding their own physical capabilities and limitations. The rule-focused Lorne became fascinated with human military doctrine and strategic thinking. They studied human command structures, logistic systems, and tactical innovations. They began updating their own defense protocols, abandoning the 12% casualty threshold in favor of mission-focused operations. The change was difficult but necessary. The Meridian Collective began developing actual military capacity for the first time in centuries. They constructed warships designed for combat rather than just defense. They hired human advisors to train their crews. They understood that protecting their extensive trade networks required the will to fight, not just the desire for peace. Rilth's comprehensive research became required reading in military academies and universities across a dozen species. Her analysis of human warfare psychology was studied by officers, politicians, philosophers, and historians. She had become the galaxy's foremost expert on understanding humanity. Her book, Understanding the Deathworlders: Lessons in Survival and Sacrifice, became a cultural phenomenon. The central argument was elegant. Humans were not naturally violent. They were naturally determined. They fought because they refused to accept defeat, whether the enemy was their own planet, each other, or external threats. One passage was quoted in academic papers across the galaxy. The Concordance chose comfort over capability and nearly paid the ultimate price. Humanity chose capability even at the cost of comfort and survived everything their world could throw at them. Perhaps lasting peace requires both approaches: the wisdom to avoid unnecessary conflict and the strength to win necessary battles. But the changes were not universally welcomed. Some species saw humanity as a corrupting influence on galactic culture. They protested the militarization of what had been peaceful space. They argued the Talon conflict was an isolated incident that did not justify such dramatic transformation. Their arguments lost strength when new threats materialized. Ancient artificial intelligences on the galactic rim began probing Concordance territory. An isolationist empire that had ignored galactic affairs for millennia suddenly showed expansionist tendencies. Pirates from the dark regions between spiral arms began raiding outer colonies with increasing boldness. In each case, human forces or human-trained units responded effectively, sometimes with force when necessary, sometimes with diplomacy backed by credible deterrence. The galaxy learned that humanity's real strength was not just their capacity for violence, but their judgment about when violence was truly necessary. 5 years after Garrison Field, Admiral Mitchell retired from active military command. She was appointed as the first Human Concordance Counselor. Her first major proposal was creating the Joint Defense Force, a permanent military organization combining human expertise with concordance resources and personnel from willing species. The proposal passed with overwhelming support. Species that had once feared militarization now understood its value. The Joint Defense Force became the shield protecting peaceful civilizations. Human officers trained recruits from multiple species, teaching not just combat techniques but the ethics of warfare. When to fight, when to show restraint, how to win while maintaining honor. Vorin, elderly now even by Aventi standards, met with Mitchell in a peaceful garden on Concordance Prime. They had become genuine friends over the years, bonded by shared experiences navigating the complex integration of two very different cultures. "I sometimes wonder if we sacrificed something important," Vorin said quietly. "We were peaceful, civilized. Now we build weapons and train soldiers. Have we lost our way?" Mitchell considered her response carefully. "You have not lost your civilization, Vorin. You have learned to protect it properly. Peace is not the absence of capability for violence. True peace is possessing that capability and choosing to use it only when absolutely necessary. That choice, that deliberate restraint is what defines civilization." She gestured at the garden around them. "My people learned this through terrible suffering. We fought ourselves for millennia before we understood. You are learning the same lesson with far less pain. That represents progress." Vorin's 4 eyes focused on her. 37,000 humans died at Garrison Field alone. How do you live with that cost? We remember them. We honor their sacrifice, and we ensure it meant something. Every peaceful day in Concordance space, every child who grows up without experiencing war, every civilization that chooses diplomacy, because force is available but not preferred, that is what those 37,000 died for. That is how we carry the weight. Earth itself had transformed. The quarantine was fully lifted. Human vessels traveled freely through galactic space. But more significantly, the galaxy was coming to Earth. Alien students enrolled in human universities. Alien tourists visited historical sites and museums. Alien diplomats participated in human governmental processes. The Museum of Human History expanded to include a wing dedicated to the Concordance War. It displayed weapons, ship models, and personal stories from the conflict. But it also showcased the treaties, cultural exchanges, and friendships that followed. It presented both faces of humanity, warriors and peacemakers, destroyers and builders, two sides of the same complex species. Young humans and young aliens stood together in that museum, studying exhibits about Garrison Field. They saw names of the fallen etched in memorial walls. They watched recordings of the battle. They examined the peace treaty that followed. A human child asked her Aventi companion, "Were your people always peaceful?" The Aventi considered the question. "No, we just forgot we were capable of anything else. We forgot that peace must be defended, not just desired." "Your people reminded us. What changed?" "We learned to do both. Build weapons and hospitals, train soldiers and teachers, prepare for war while working for peace. That is what real civilization means." On the galactic periphery, other powers observed and adjusted their calculations. The Concordance was no longer an easy target. The humans had changed that fundamental equation. Some powers abandoned expansion plans into Concordance territory. Others began planning more carefully, understanding that aggression would now face organized, capable resistance. The galaxy was more armed than before. More species maintained military forces, but it was also more stable because potential aggressors understood that conquest carried real costs and consequences. Counselor Mitchell gave a memorial speech on the 5th anniversary of Garrison Field. Representatives from every Concordance species attended. Human veterans stood alongside former Concordance officers and even reformed Talon military personnel who had fought on the losing side. 5 years ago, this galaxy learned a lesson it had forgotten. That peace without strength is simply a pause before conquest. My people emerged from isolation and reminded you of truths your ancestors once knew. that survival requires vigilance, that civilization requires defenders, that some must be willing to embrace violence so others can live without it. She looked at the memorial wall displaying thousands of names. These individuals paid the ultimate price so the galaxy could remember these lessons. We honor them not with grief alone but with determination. We will maintain the peace they died to secure. We will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will oppose aggression wherever it emerges. And we will never forget that freedom and safety require sacrifice. Someone always pays the price. The ceremony concluded with silence. Humans and aliens stood together, remembering the fallen and honoring their sacrifice. Then they returned to their lives, to their shared work building a better galaxy. A galaxy that understood both peace and strength. A galaxy transformed by its encounter with the Deathworlders. Years later, a young archivist working in the same facility where Rilth had once worked discovered an old file. The original quarantine order for Earth, 900 cycles old. At the bottom, almost lost in the formatting, was a personal note from the counselor who had written it. These humans are dangerous beyond measure. They are violent, aggressive, and relentlessly determined. They nearly destroyed themselves and may yet do so. But I cannot help wondering, if they ever learn to direct that extraordinary capacity for survival outward instead of inward, they might become the most formidable force the galaxy has ever known. Let us hope we never need to find out. The young archivist smiled and carefully preserved the document. The galaxy had found out, and against all reasonable expectations, humanity had been exactly what was needed. The Deathworlders were no longer quarantined. They were partners, protectors, and teachers. The galaxy had forgotten fear, and humans had reminded them, not to spread terror but to enable preparedness, not to conquer but to defend. The comfortable age of undefended peace was over. The age of peace through strength had begun, and the galaxy, though few would admit it openly, was stronger for the change.